Good. So yes, what I think is that that the social media has really changed how white supremacists and anti-Semites operate, because it makes a lot of things much easier. So it facilitates the dissemination of rumors and propaganda in not only that it's more massive and in a quantitative way, but also interactive, much more than ever before. And also it radicalizes anti-Semites and white supremacists because the content is unlimited. It really only depends on the time of the individuals that they spend then to consume the propaganda. And it also gives an opportunity to connect white supremacists and anti-Semites, and also potential anti-Semites, across ideological and geographical boundaries, much easier than ever before. And as you probably know, social media works often with only fragments of thoughts and short messages, and that really allows even the crossing of boundaries, and to connect people from the alt-right, from the old white nationalists, neo-Nazi types, Christian nationalists, as we heard just in the presentation a little bit earlier, but also from the far left or from Islamists, and often, especially after October 7th, anti-Zionism is a unifying theme there, but also what we heard, what we had before that, conspiracy theories, they can also be a bridge between all these different ideological ideas. And something that I think needs to be stressed also in this context here, and I'm grateful to Eric Ward, who gave us this good quote. He wrote an article in 2017 already, where he really pointed out that one, American white nationalism is a revolutionary social movement committed to building a whites-only nation, and anti-Semitism forms its theoretical core. And that has a reason, of course. So he says the successes of the civil rights movement created a terrible problem for white supremacist ideology. How could a race of inferiors have unseated this power structure through organizing alone? For that matter, how could feminist and LGBTQ people have upended traditional gender relations? So if you put yourself in the mind of a white nationalist or white supremacist, and if you believe that the white race is superior, then how do you explain that non-white people have gained power in society? And of course, the explanation that they come up with is that this is the Jews' fault, that they have orchestrated these developments. And one of these theories is the Great Replacement theory, that says first of all, it says that societies like the American society or European society is under threat by non-whites who are coming in by migration, and will replace the white people. And this is organized by the Jews. So that's in a nutshell the replacement theory that has become more and more prominent on social media, and including on mainstream social media. So I think what we also need to understand, that white supremacists and also political anti-Semites, which I distinguish from social anti-Semites, have a revolutionary mindset. They want really to fundamentally change the society. They want a different society. And democracy is not their model. So white supremacists want either a whites-only society that would be white nationalist, or a society with legal racial hierarchies where whites are on the top. And political anti-Semites, they operate with a pitches of panic. That's a term Bernard Harrison, a British philosopher, coined. So that means not false generalizations or dislike against Jews, but really thinking that Jews form a secretive group that threaten the in-group, that they're conspiring against non-Jews on a global scale, but also national scale, even a regional scale, and that Jews are seen as a collective that are seen as a global threat. So radical political anti-Semites see Jews as an existential threat and target the very existence of Jews. So this, of course, is also not possible in a democratic society. So both want really to change societies in a revolutionary way. So how do you do this if you are in a minority, which the white nationalists and hopefully the anti-Semites are? So what can you do? You can go for an armed struggle. You can do mass mobilization and protest. You can work on propaganda and ideology. You can do clandestine activities, organizations. You can exploit divisions within the ruling elites. You can try to build a parallel state, and only some of it you can do online. But you can focus on propaganda and ideology. You can help organize armed struggle, right, to radicalize people and even coordinate armed struggle. You can do the same thing to mass mobilizations and protests. We've seen that and had been covered already by other speakers here on the conference. You can exploit divisions, and you can maybe not build a parallel state, but you can build parallel spaces on different platforms or on groups on platforms. So that's what you can do, and some have been strategic about it, at least on the propaganda side. So this is from Andrew Anglin from Daily Stormer, which is a white nationalist neo-Nazi type platform. He has often been banned from servers, but you can still find the Daily Stormer online. But he wrote a pamphlet in 2016, says a normie's guide to the alt-right. So, and what he laid out there is still more or less valid after 8 years, almost. So he lays out different factions of the alt-right and their specific contributions. It's a longer text, but he emphasizes the troll culture, conspiracy theories, and different sections, if you want, and says they all work together. And interestingly, describes the alt-right more as an online mob without a strong leader. He described them as disenfranchised and mostly anonymous, mostly young white men. And the way of operating is with a lot of irony. And this is where where a lot of memes come in that also make it easier to operate in mainstream media, because then it's not 100% clear, apparently, for the moderators of some of these of the platforms, if that needs to be taken down. In these memes, very frequent feature is some form of Nazi glorification, either in the form of Hitler or some references to Nazis. They claim, and this is the mindset, that here's a quote from him: "This is about survival. We must win by any means necessary, or we'll cease to exist." So this kind of message is a strong message, and it's not a coincidence that there are so many references to Nazism and Hitler, because of course the Holocaust is an obstacle, if you want, for white nationalists, because they have to deal with that somehow, either by downplaying it, denying it, or by glorifying it. And what he pointed out is that there shouldn't be any compromise in these neo-Nazi type messaging. And also anti-Semitism needs to remain at the core of the movement, he explicitly says. So the goal is to create a counterculture, which eventually becomes the dominant culture. But it's not this kind of strategic thinking. I think he made it, but it's not, of course, shared by everyone. It's this kind of mob culture. So what is then the relation between the fringe and mainstream platforms? So we can see that white supremacists often use unmoderated fringe platforms, such as Gap, or 4chan, or Getter, or many others, or Telegram, some channels there. And that they use this to build a community of like-minded people, which then often self-radicalizes. So we have seen during COVID, we have seen that in some Telegram channels that were in our observations on German language Telegram channels that were opposed to some measures by the government to reduce the impact of COVID, of the pandemic, and that radicalized in a way that in the beginning there was some discussion, but then those who were critical of the more radical slogans, then more and more white nationalist slogans, they were attacked viciously, and they went out of these channels. And after not so long, there were even calls for violence in these channels. But anyway, these more or less then closed communities of like-minded people, they produce then slogans and memes and hashtags that they can then try to push with links to more mainstream platforms. They often try to do this with things that relate to news items, and prefer issues that can be produced then this kind of prejudice of panic, or that this kind of idea that the in-group is existentially threatened. There can be health issues, the pandemic, then children's education, border, migration, wars. One of these hashtags that is still popular, that was, I think, came up about 2 years ago, is the noticing, that you can still find on Twitter or X and other platforms, that in itself doesn't reveal anything white nationalist or anti-Semitic. But if you look at what is then promoted with this hashtag, that is usually deeply anti-Semitic. And after October 7th, we have seen on all platforms that we have looked at a radicalization of anti-Semitic sentiments, more sharing between users who are on the far right, far left, and Islamists, and more open calls also for violence against Jews. Has been used to form these not formal coalitions between these different groups, so alt-right, neo-Nazi types, Christian nationalists, but then also from the far left and Islamists. And we have seen some kind of formal relations, but these are so far exceptional. You see two of these posts, and that was some of it even before October 7th. So that's an interesting development. We also see people who are influences like this Jackson Hinkle. He describes himself as a mega communist or American conservative, Marxist-Leninist, and he promotes a lot of different ideas, very much on the conservative side, but also very open to a discourse that you can find on the radical left in terms of how he thinks about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so he can find alliances from very different people on his platforms. And what are then these kind of memes that white supremacists, white nationalists use and try to influence mainstream discourse? So some work with sexist imagery that might be appealing to young white men in this meme production, but some also use, and that more frequently even, images that are very aggressive, that promote violence. And you see some that were here after October 7th, where you see in the paraglider, that obviously is a reference to the Hamas terrorist paragliders who committed the pogrom on October 7th. And you see here that they put an image of Pepe the Frog, which stands for the alt-right. So there's an identification with Hamas in this image. This is from 4chan. And you see also a series that was popular already in the Ukrainian-Russian war. In that case, it was comfy happening in Ukraine, and that was very pro-Russian by many of the far right. And here you see imagery that is then very much pro Hamas, and again identifying on the top right, you see a German soldier in the middle of that, that the far right often, or the neo-Nazi types identify with, allegedly then fighting for Palestinians or for Hamas. And of course, you see another meme here, the caricature of Jews that has been popular for I think since internet really almost started disseminating images. And here's something that we have been observing on X or Twitter. So we had until last year access to the entire Twitter or X archive. So we could sample, do representative samples of conversations about Jews. So we took from different time periods, starting from 2019 to April 2023, samples. So we scraped all messages that had the word Jews in there and that were live, and sampled them over it and had them manually annotated by our team of annotators. And this is what we saw in the development. So when we saw it was under 10% in 2019, and had some variations. One peak, of course, that's not a coincidence, was in May to August 2021, and that is because of a high level of anti-Semitic activities on this mainstream platform. In May, when there was a violent conflict between Israel and Gaza Strip, or Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and then it went down again. But in the period of September, December 2022, that was when Elon Musk took over Twitter, but it was also the period when Kanye West very prominently disseminated anti-Semitic messages. And there was a big debate on Twitter then if Kanye West was right or not right. So that led also to an increase of anti-Semitic discussions within discussions about Jews. And it went not down afterwards. So it went even up a little bit in early 2023. And unfortunately, we don't have access now to the Twitter archive anymore. But what we see now on X and Twitter is, I suspect that this has gone up widely even more. And if you think about it, this is a percentage of all conversations where Jews have been, the word Jews have been used, and 20% translates, of course, to hundreds of thousands of such messages per month even. Good. So what is the takeaway from that? I think the white supremacists and anti-Semites, they have succeeded in spreading fragments, at least, of their ideology on mainstream social media without compromising on content, despite the increase of moderation of these platforms since 2017. The mainstream platforms have an interest in keeping that at least a little bit down, but they have not succeeded at that. The white supremacists and anti-Semites have exploited emotions very successfully. There's a lot of engagement with these also vile memes and slogans. They have succeeded in linking unmoderated fringe platforms with mainstream platforms. So what you can often then see is that there is a screenshot then from 4chan. You can find it on X or also on Facebook, or videos are used from, or snippets of videos from radical platforms are used then on TikTok. They have also succeeded in building some loose alliances across ideological boundaries. And we've seen a really radicalization since 10/7 at least, in terms of anti-Semitism and calling for violence against Jews, including on mainstream social media. So what are then really the mechanisms of operation dissemination strategies? Well, it's more a mob mentality still, I think, and that was interesting to hear also in the offline spaces, that there is apparently not very strong thinking about strategies, only from some individuals, but this mob mentality is successful. They constantly push the boundaries and explode emotions, which of course the way social media works facilitates. And they also use the fact that violence and this very violent, aggressive posts are attractive, which you can sometimes find maybe shocking or surprising, but this has an attraction in itself. And some have developed some strategies. So what is in recent years, we have seen that there are attempts to build a parallel system online with interactive communication platforms such as Gap, for example, and parallel economy, so that business are then promoted there that are from the far right or white nationalists. So I would like to stop here and then have hopefully a little bit of time for discussion.